Hey everybody, Mr. Habanero here. You know, it's not very common in general for me to rewatch animes that I've already watched all the way through. There are a few that I can definitely think of. You know, I have some all-time favorites that always every once in a while kind of make me want to go back to that special place in that anime that I love so much. You know, I have my few favorites that I consider to be the greatest animes that I've ever seen in my entire life. Now, this video is not really about that. You know, I can do a whole nother video talking about my favorite animes of all time, but the overall point is that, you know, in general, I never really find a reason where I need to go back and watch an entire anime series, you know, most of the time, depending on, you know, whether it's just your stereotypical anime, because I do actually find myself watching a lot of animes, but one anime in particular that had me coming back to rewatch the entire thing is that time that I got reincarnated as a slime. Now, I knew that the second season has been out for a while, and I knew that I wanted to watch it and kind of experience it and talk about it. And I wanted to go in and just watch the entire second season and collect my ideas and thoughts and opinions about it. But what I was surprised to find is that I couldn't quite remember everything that happened in the first season. So I decided, you know, while I was thinking about it, you know what, maybe it would be better to go back and rewatch the entire first season. And then as I make my way through the first season, kind of recollect my thoughts, pay attention to things that I had not noticed before or seen before, which has happened with some anime series that I have watched. And while watching That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, I found it very interesting to notice a lot of things that I didn't notice the first time I viewed it. And those things really mattered when I came into watching the second season. And I eventually thanked myself for rewatching the entire first season. Now, there were some things that didn't quite resonate with me. There was one thing that I felt like was a problem overall while watching the entire first season of That Time I Was Reincarnated as a Slime. And I definitely felt that it was one worth mentioning, but it definitely was the only problem I had while watching the entire show. I definitely had to say that there was overall this weird pacing issue. I definitely felt like as I watched the first season, it felt like more so than the first time that I had viewed it, that the overall pace was too quick. It felt like that they had montages when they really shouldn't have sometimes. It felt like that sometimes they would jump into new portions of a story before really properly explaining the previous story. I definitely had an issue with a few of the characters that felt like that they were very deep, and you could tell that the story wanted to tell you a lot about those characters by building them up and making their appearances seem important in certain scenes, and then they would either just be left to the side or not properly explained, or they would move on into the next story. There were definitely a few characters that really stood out the most to me that I felt were definitely a problem because they didn't get as much storytelling and screen time as was actually necessary to explain those characters properly. Overall, though, like, I'm going to go ahead and say that yes, there was a pacing problem, and yes, that it felt like they jumped the gun on some things, and some of the characters could have been probably more properly developed overall. But other than that, if I just kind of set that aside and I say, okay, that's an issue, the overall storytelling throughout the entire first season was fine. It really was. And no matter how many times that I said, okay, I wish they would have explained this a bit better. Oh, I wish they would have slowed down just a little bit and kind of explained it just a little more thoroughly, I still couldn't help but find myself enjoying it more or less the same way the first time I had viewed the entire first season. I still had a great time. I still had fun getting to know the characters. I still had fun watching them grow to the level that the first season allowed them to grow. And I definitely enjoyed watching the main character kind of become this problem-solving person who tries to always take the peaceful route as best as they possibly can. However, that particular point was very important, and more so than I had realized upon viewing the first season. the fact that the main character finds it so very important, Rimuru himself, finds it incredibly important that he has to try and take the peaceful route. And something that occurred to me while watching through the second season was that, and they made it very clear, they kind of hint at it when you're first watching the second season and you're going through it, and they make it become very important and stick out in your mind as a viewer, that you have to keep in mind that sometimes you can't go the peaceful route. Sometimes a situation can't be solved under peaceful means, no matter how hard you try. And you can try to reason with unreasonable people all day, for as long as you possibly can, and sometimes that's just, it's just not the answer. And the second season did a beautiful job, an absolutely spectacular job at doing exactly that. Now, I had some really weird feelings overall while watching the second season. In fact, by the time that I got through, maybe about halfway through the second season, I hated it. Legitimately, I thought it was terrible. I was very upset by a lot of different things. A lot of it was based on the route that characters took, the mentality that the characters were dealing with, having to say, watching the characters kind of, watching the bad characters be bad in the way that they were designed, watching the good characters take the route that they believe is the least resistance, or even that, they didn't want to necessarily fight back, or they were trying to find ways to cope or deal with whatever kind of problems were thrown at them. It bothered me a lot. It really did, especially since I've been watching some more darker animes recently where, a lot of the time battling and warring and fighting is definitely a more large issue where they solve problems with their fists. And I found myself being annoyed by a lot of the characters, especially the bad guys. I felt like there were times where the bad guys were just starting problems for the sake of starting problems. I felt like that the good guys were being pushovers at times, and it really bothered me. So much so that, like I said, when I'd gotten through about halfway through of the second season of that time I was reincarnated as a slime, I was annoyed. I was very upset. I was sitting here on my couch yelling at my TV set like I normally do. And I was yelling, why would you do that? I can't believe it. I'm so annoyed. I'm so pissed off. I'm so angry. And I was starting to believe that the show was bad. And I didn't know how to cope with it and handle it. And it was really irritating watching, especially with the good characters, watch them just get pushed over by really annoying bad guys that felt like they shouldn't be able to get away with what they're doing. But the thing is that I had to realize going further and deeper into the story is that annoyance was intentional as far as I could tell. I had to definitely get through to the end of the series, watching the entire series all the way through and getting to the ending portion of that time I was reincarnated as a slime to finally sit down and realize that that annoyance was totally intentional. They built those characters up that way. They wanted, or as at least I felt like it was anyways, I believed that they purposely made the characters do those annoying things to get that emotion out of me. And, and I would even say that the entire second season is in fact an emotional roller coaster. I felt annoyance, I felt anger, I felt sadness, I felt happiness, I felt like, I felt like that when things were... I felt like that there was a lot of injustice and there were characters that needed to be punished. And for a long time of watching a large portion of the entire series of the second season, that it was going unjust. the characters that needed to be punished were not being punished, and it felt like that the good guys refused to make a position or make a move to extract that justice they so obviously deserved, and it really bothered me. But as you go through, there's a tipping point. You get through to the second half of the second season, and there's a tipping point. And you realize that there's great tragedy and there's great sadness, and then you get angry. And because I definitely did. I was angry. By the time I got to the second portion of that time I was reincarnated slime, I was angry. I was very sad with a particular important event that occurred in the story, and I was very angry, and I was actually even more so annoyed with the show. But when you watch the main character Rimuru accomplish what he does after he gets to that tipping point, after you hit that point of great tragedy, and you watch him cope and learn, and he finally understands, he gets to that moment where he has to sit down with, you know, his fellow, compatriots, his monster friends and such. And he sits down and he realizes that sometimes, and you know, it goes very much against a lot of the themes of the first season, which I loved. I really did love it. Was he sits down and he realizes that sometimes peace is not always the correct answer. And the show greatly reflects that. And it took all of the annoyances that I had with the first portion, you know, the annoying villains that seemed like they were getting away with too much, and you know, the peaceful characters that sat back and just took it like as if they deserved it. It was wonderful when you see him stand up and say, you know what? Sometimes peace isn't the right answer. Sometimes the people that do wrong things and do bad things sometimes those people, they have to have that lesson where if you're going to do something wrong, you're going to have to accept the fact that you will be punished for it. And watching the main character Rimuru, the slime, and his fellow monster allies, watching them completely and deservedly so dish out that punishment was just the absolute most relieving thing. It was the most relieving feeling when you get through that show and you see it all occur. Because let me tell you, I was very upset with the second season. It really, like, in the sense of making my way through it, I was very upset by a lot of things, and I felt like that they were just going to let it be that way. But when you get to that end, those last couple of episodes, where everything plays out and everything is justified, and you feel like that necessary vengeance to fix the tragedy that occurred in the middle of the series, and to, you know, justify all of the evil things that occur throughout the second season, it is an amazing feeling. Absolutely spectacular. And I would even, you know, it was funny because I was making all these having all these thoughts that the first season was better than the second season when I was first going through the second season. But when you get to that ending and you see how everything plays out in full scale, it's perfect. It's great. I was so happy to see how everything played out by the time you get to those last couple of episodes. And I really wouldn't have it any other way. Now, like I said, I still stick by what I said of the problem that I had with the first season, and I did feel like that there was still a little bit of that in the second season, which is the show could slow its roll a bit. If you could just, if you would just tell the story just a little slower, give me a little bit more information, really build those characters for me. I really want to see it because they clearly have a great story. And there's so much that the overall story, that time I was reincarnated as a slime, there's a lot that they want to tell you. So if there was one thing I could ask is that please slow down and tell me more. And that's not to say that it's, the whole anime is destroyed because of its pacing and that it's too fast and thus the story is ruined. That's not the case at all, because I still very much enjoyed it. but I would so much enjoy it more if they would just slow down. You know, enjoy the scenery, smell the roses a bit. Tell me about why this character is important. Like, give me a little bit more of their history, how they, cope with the other characters and how they work with them. And, what do they have a dark past? Are they, a naturally good hero? Like, really just take the time to slow down and tell me about it. And if they would do that, I really think that the show would be just way, way better done. And that's literally the only issue I have with the entire show. I thought it was fantastic. I thought the second season was amazing. And I'm actually legitimately excited to see the third season. And I do kind of hope that they go the same route, maybe, where, because I did admit that I felt like that the show was manipulating my emotions, making me feel annoyed and angered and disgusted. But by the time I got to the end of it, I thought it was all perfectly fine and totally justified, and I would love to see more of it going forward into what will there probably is going to be a third season. I think it's pretty obvious that they're going to have to go and do a third season, so... Anyways, I think that I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you guys all so much for being here. And I'm going to say all the wonderful things, which is, guys, go ahead and like if you enjoyed this video. Press that like button. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel. We're having a good time here building up a nice little group of wonderful people. Go ahead and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. It lets everybody know all of the wonderful things that I'm doing around here. Check in the description below as well for all of my wonderful links, such as PayPal and Streamlabs. You know what? Why don't you go ahead and tell me what you thought about that time I got reincarnated as a slime. Let me know if you thought that the season was good. Did you feel like it was an emotional roller coaster like I did? Did you feel like that your emotions were maybe being a little manipulated, but maybe in a good way or possibly a bad way? Let me know in the comments down below, okay, guys? And I'm also going to give a wonderful shout out to my amazing Patreon members because they support me in everything that I do, and I greatly appreciate it. And those wonderful Patreon members are ya boy Lettuce, Bo Falcon, Fajouk Enterprises, James P., Miss Rebecca, and Mr. Shed. Thank you so much, Patreon members, for supporting me with everything that you do. I greatly appreciate everything, always. And other than that, follow your dreams, guys, and this is Mr. Habanero signing out. See you later, guys. Thank you for being here.